Oopsie. Decaf double tall, non-fat cap for Bruce.
You got it, buddy.
Yeah, that's a wonderful choice, Bruce.
Thank you, Sam.
Yeah, it certainly is.
Take care.
One caramel macchiato. It's very hot. Good morning. Vanilla grande, no foam latte. That's a wonderful choice.
Thanks, Sam.
Yeah.
Do you remember when Sean Penn made you cry a bucket of tears in the movie I Am Sam? Well, if you haven't seen it, you might want to. With the DD community taking strides towards community integration and equal rights, you might see a similar scene every day. Now, here are some questions. Why is it still uncommon to see people with developmental disabilities in school, the workplace, or even the community? Why aren't more making their marks in society and exploring their maximum potential? And are we doing everything we can to ensure they have the same rights that others do? By the end of this short video, you'll be fully capable of improving how you communicate and interact with people with developmental disabilities. We'll be gaining insights from Dr. Hannah Barham-Brown and her experiences in the medical profession rolling through the hospital halls and rooms. Hit the notification bell to stay tuned to our daily hacks and news about the DSP industry and the DD community. Please consider subscribing or leaving a comment. First impressions and people with developmental disabilities. They say first impressions usually last, but is it a fair and reasonable thing for people with developmental disabilities?
So I roll onto the ward one day, and this elderly patient takes one look at me and yells at the top of her voice, "What's wrong with my doctor?" The whole ward falls silent. And from her bed, she continues to stare at me. "I said, what's wrong with my doctor?" Ongoing silence, because no one knows what to say.
Okay, maybe her case was extreme. You might not react the same way as her patient, but no doubt you'd have certain feelings if you were in her shoes. It's inevitable for us to have opinions on what we see, but keep in mind not to judge a book by its cover. How do people with developmental disabilities deal with first impressions? If you're not in the healthcare field, is it possible you need to learn more about developmental disabilities? It's easy to succumb to stereotypical thinking that goes something like this. People diagnosed with autism can't understand things, or people in wheelchairs can't do anything productive. But have you ever wondered what it's like to be on the other side? How do people with developmental disabilities deal with misconceptions, especially in first meetings?
So I roll closer towards her, reach out and take her hands. Well, I'm quite disorganized. I'm very loud. And my legs don't really work. Now, how are you feeling today?
Brown's patient immediately acknowledged her rolling in a wheelchair, but the way it played out may be a little extreme. Acknowledging a disability is not necessarily a bad thing, contrary to what many people think. A better way to approach this could have been simply to ask the person politely, "Do you mind if I ask you why you need to use a wheelchair?" Knowing, of course, that the person has the right to respond or not to answer this. Properly addressing someone's developmental disability allows you to learn how to improve communication. In the same way, communication can be adjusted when interacting with a family member versus a coworker or a friend. What's the mistake you could make when dealing with people with developmental disabilities?
18 months after my diagnosis, I qualified as a doctor. And now I'm a trainee GP. There aren't many doctors in wheelchairs. I've become a bit of a novelty wherever I go. And you know what? It's bloody exhausting. Sometimes I don't want the double takes as I roll in, or the questions, or the well-meaning comments. I've had a very mixed response from my patients, and even some of my colleagues have been less than welcoming when I roll in and introduce myself. But why am I such a surprise? There are 13.9 million disabled people in the UK. That's 1 in 5 of us. 1 in 5. And yet, the disability employment gap currently stands at 30%. That's the gap between the number of disabled people in work versus the number of able-bodied people. And I want to change all that. I want more people like my mum, like me, to be visible in medicine, in work, and in society, because we are here, but we're rarely seen or acknowledged. So I have become focused on being a role model.
So as you might correctly figure, the mistake most people make is to ignore the developmental disability. Why is it important to acknowledge people with developmental disabilities?
So why is this important? This is important because I have seen the eyes of kids in wheelchairs light up when their doctor rolls in a chair just like them. Suddenly, they're not the kid in a wheelchair anymore. They are the kid who could grow up to be whatever they want to be, regardless of their legs misbehaving. It's that spark of self-confidence, even when the world is telling you you're different. That spark is life-changing. Becoming disabled does change you. It's changed how I speak to people, and it's sure as hell changed how people speak to me. One day, a patient who'd had a really tough few years opened up to me in a way she'd never spoken to a doctor before. And at the end of our conversation, she reached forwards. She took my hands and said, "See, I know you get it, Doc, because you're broken, just like I am. Sometimes I am broken, and that's okay, because my brokenness gives me a unique ability to connect to my patients as that patient realized I get it. I have an intimate knowledge of their experiences and the systems they are forced to work within."
Whenever we look for experts in the medical field, we always look for those with lots of experience. Why? Because experience is the best teacher. People with developmental disabilities have so much experience with their diagnosis. It often becomes untapped potential when we ignore them and do not acknowledge their existence. Trust me, there is way more to gain and learn by acknowledging someone's situation rather than ignoring it. You can become educated about the condition and about the individual. People with developmental disabilities have different ways of viewing things, so their input is always valuable. Companies, institutions, and society miss out on a lot of potential knowledge and experience if we choose to ignore people with developmental disabilities. Let's start changing that. Now, it is your time to move. Get services. If you have a developmentally disabled family member who needs support, please click below or in the description to get uncompromised DSP services. Become one of our staff. Remember that the First Choice Family Services doors are always open for results-driven professionals. Feel free to show your support to the developmentally disabled community by donating or participating in our charity and campus ambassadors programs. Get involved. Be social. Finally, get in touch with us through our social media channels to be updated on the news in the DSP industry and the developmentally disabled community. And if you like this video, please share it with your friends in need of a job after you subscribe. Thanks very much for watching. And remember, First Choice Family Services is your information resource for the DSP industry. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell notification so you can stay connected.